Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. Practice is a way of being. This is a conversation with Kate Emery, who is being painter, a very good painter. 2 years ago, I recorded a conversation with Kate Emery, being the business leader, the founder of a business as well as a nonprofit organization. Very, very busy. I had no idea that she painted, and I was on her board of directors for the nonprofit. Well, recently, it was clear that she is Kate Emery, the painter now, and likely to be that for the duration, however long that may be. Consequently, we're going to have some wonderful paintings in the world because of her commitment to this new practice that she's using to grow and develop herself, and with a concept of generosity, using proceeds from those sales to give to her charities, the ones that matter to her the most. Quite a remarkable transformation. You'll find out what I mean right now. This is Kate Emery. Folks, it's always a pleasure to have any kind of conversation with Kate Emery, who's a neighbor from here in Connecticut, colleague when I was serving on her board, and guest to my courses when I was teaching. And we just remarked before I started recording that Kate was one of the very first persons that I had the conversation with after Peter died 2 years ago, Kate. It's incredible how fast time goes. And reason I had Kate lined up is that Peter had asked Dave in this next conversation set that we do, and he was really looking forward to it. Could we have a woman, preferably a CEO, who has gone through all the hoops to become independent as a woman leader? And of course, right away, I'm listening. I'm going, Kate Emery, got it. Okay, Peter. She started her own company. She still chairs the company and all that. But that's the business, Kate. But we're going to focus on Kate, a new practitioner in another way. And that is Kate Emery, the artist, the oil painter. Is that correct, Kate?
That's correct, yes.
So did you know that the other Kate that's now emerged and has been painting like crazy and beautifully, as I can see in the background, folks, and you can't, was that Kate always around and you kind of finally said, okay, time to play?
Oh, great question. I think maybe it was always there, but I didn't know it. I think I grew up in a family. I like to describe my dad as living in his head. He was an engineer. He was a physics teacher, and life revolved around ideas and abstracts. And he was not particularly aware of the physical world around him.
Wow.
And my mom was a social worker, and she lived in her heart. And she did not see the physical world in terms of what somebody was wearing or what their house looked like, but she was very aware of what was going on emotionally with people. So growing up in that world, I wasn't sort of the outside world didn't illuminate for me until I met what was to become my husband, and we started gardening together, and that sort of opened up my eyes to color and that kind of thing. And then it was a hop, skip, and a jump to taking up painting, and it was a delight once I sort of realized this whole new world opening up to me, and that was 30 years or so ago, and since then it's just been a part-time thing. But as you say, very recently now I can do it full-time.
I see in your painting both heart and head, and not only the one that I can see on camera, folks, but I know how Kate is doing this differently, and I'm going to ask her to describe it in a moment. But yes, she could sell these paintings and does, but that's the head side. Okay, she's a businesswoman and she doesn't want to have her studio with 200 plus paintings leaning against the wall. She'd like to move them out into the world to give other people pleasure. But the heart, I knew your mom, and I can almost feel what your mom would be saying when you told her, well, Mom, I'm going to also make sure that I've set this up in a way that donations come along with the purchase. So talk a little bit more about that idea. When did it come to you, and how's it working?
I love it. It came to me so what I do is, last year I said a third or more, but this year I've decided on a half. Half of proceeds that I receive from paintings go to different charitable organizations, and I'm trying to establish, what are the three priorities for me? So I think basic human needs is one, climate change is another, and then social enterprise, of course, is a third. And so I want to have the money that comes in from painting be able to go out to support those kind of or efforts in those areas. And so it may be an auction of a painting, or it may be just somebody who really doesn't even know about that comes to the studio and buys something. But by the end of the year, I'm squaring up and making sure that 50% has gone to organizations. And selfishly, in one way of looking at it, it was really helpful to me to feel good about what I was doing, because here I am, I've left the workaday world, and now I am holed up in my studio doing something that just feels so awesome and luxurious and sort of selfish, just painting. And hey, if I can use it to, give a little bit back to the world, then I don't have to feel so selfish about it. So selfishly, it helped make me not feel. It's you're right. It's my mom. It's my Puritan background. It's probably a lot of different things, but it makes it wonderful.
I was going to throw in the Puritan part. I resonated. My DNA was just tinkling and going, oh, yes, I understand that, Kate. I come from that same stream of, don't get a big head, or, if you get $1, make sure you give 50 away and save the other half. It was like, oh, my God, when do we have fun?
Yeah, right.
But we did. And also, it's interesting that your last point, that you want to do the work that you love, but you also want it to go out and benefit others, is just in line with what we created when we fostered social enterprise. Mm-hmm. Yeah, persons would come to Reset, Connecticut Social Enterprise Trust, and they'd say, I have a real passion for feeding people in Hartford. I don't have any money, but I have an idea that I could raise some money and pay my bills and give some. And there we are. You're doing it right now.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. No, I think it is a very similar, comes from the same place in the heart and the head.
See, when Peter Vale and I collaborated to get going on what's become sort of my passion, it is my passion, actually, creating a similar kind of picture, word portraits, if you will, the podcast and the book, which is digital, and it's going to be ever mutable in the best sense of mutations. I was intrigued with the idea that, as he and I were both sort of intellectuals, small I's. He was a big I intellectual. I was just making it up as I went along. But we were very much in our heads. In fact, when Peter became so impaired from paralysis, and later all the infections and diseases that went with being paralyzed, he was only in his head in his last few weeks, only in his head. And yet there he was, planning with joy in his voice, the next set of conversations, which we had just added into our podcast protocol, having a 3-way conversation. He loved it. But he was almost totally in his head.
Wow.
And so what that brought to mind for me is that practice has got to be moved along far more than by avarice or need for profit, or, all those things that people might create something a little bit more meaningful to themselves as a practice. But what can take it to a much higher level, which is where you are now, is that you can connect all aspects of your personality in a particular endeavor.
Yes. And, I had Walker, and I think it had gotten to a point, I started it 40 years ago. And I think it had gotten to a point, or I had gotten to a point where it felt, you run into cycles running a business. And so there's the good times and there's the bad times. And sometimes it feels very Sisyphusian, like, oh my God, here we go again. And so, and as the repetition picks up, and as you're getting, or as I was getting older, there was less and less energy for, okay, let's go again. And actually, during one of those later phases, my husband pointed out to me, he said, Kate, you seem to be doing a lot of paintings of women pushing rocks uphill.
Oh.
And I said, I cannot imagine where that is coming from. But
you're a geologist, that's why.
Yeah. But it was a theme, and it was a theme that was weighing on my heart, and painting was a way of working through it. But I realized that I was becoming less and less effective in the business because it didn't have that tug of my heart. It was just doing the heavy lifting, and whether it's stubbornness or Puritan upbringing or whatever, but I wasn't gonna just say I'm walking away. But I realized I needed to get help and let go of that piece. And and then I made a commitment to say no to every new endeavor for at least a year after I left Walker, to give myself time to sort of get my head back on straight. And I think in that time I realized, there's so many things out in the world that need our heads and our hearts, that you cannot pick up something just out of that sense of obligation. It has to carry you, and it has to have energy that that's gonna feed you along the way. Otherwise, you're gonna fail, and that rock's gonna roll back over you. So I think what you were saying in terms of we need to pick things that are that we care about, that give us energy. I think that is so important.
I think that was one of the huge lessons, hard-won lessons of the shutdowns in through the pandemic. And now we have something called the Great Resignation movement and all kinds of things. I think people of all age, working age, and maybe even younger, is preparing for life. Life is now made even more poignant by watching a whole nation of people suddenly unable to do what they love doing or even need to do to get through a day. The dangers are so great. So in that context, it's even more poignant, I think, for people to say, okay, let's link it all together. I've got a heart, a head, and I have a spirit. I have a spirit. And then I want to ask you this then, because I think I'm going to put it in context. I once painted by the numbers, and I was horrible at it. We had the paint by numbers kit and the watercolors and so forth. And I struggled to stay within the lines, paint the right colors. I even had a touch, paint this red, it's completely without, it's all in the head. It's like an engineer's dream, paint by the numbers. And so clearly I was very happy to get away from that. And there was not even an iota of heart or spirit in it. Yet, my sister, who was 7 years younger, would take the same thing when she was very little and start painting with wonderful precision and enjoying the heck out of it. And later on, she took up calligraphy, and so she was finding ways to take a form of art expression, and she was finding it completely her, to the point that she was teased the heck out of me when I'd write Christmas card notes to her, and then she'd get on the phone and say, "Okay, now tell me what you wrote." Whereas I'd get hers, and it would look like it came from like the Catholic Church, something they'd put out on with a frame, and she hand wrote it. So to you, then, it's not always about me all the time, but it is interesting about how the spirit works in painting. So when you start with that blank canvas, tell us a bit of what you become as you're staring at the canvas, and there's the brush, and you got this great studio. How does it all get up there to the beautiful picture I see in the back? Folks, it's a winter scene, a rising or setting sun coming through the trees. I can look around even more. There's some great Connecticut landscapes almost everywhere you look. There's the kind of beauty that we enjoy every day. But that was a blank canvas before. So how about that process?
I think the first thing when I see a scene that I'm going to paint, the first indication that it's a scene I'm going to paint is that it grabs my heart. And then the process begins in terms of trying to figure out what it is that grabbed my heart. What is is it the sunlight on the snow? And for a lot of paintings that I do, there's very much it is the emotion that is important to me, and that's what I want to bring across through the painting. So it's an allegory of sorts, and so then that's where the heart comes in, and then the head has to get involved to say, okay, how are you best going to portray that? And part of it is the composition of the painting. Part of it is the value structure, meaning light to dark, and the allocation of is it a dark painting? Is it light and airy? Is it what's the combination of value shapes? And then same with color. What are the different color relationships that you're gonna use to bring that about? And so you do have to then, that's very much a head thing.
Oh yeah, very much. Yeah.
And then it comes back to the heart when you're on the canvas and you're just sort of responding to what's there in front of you. So it's a dance.
Wow.
And I think that is part of what I really love about it, because it is that combination that to me makes it successful, is knowing when to step away and think, and knowing when to let go of that part of yourself and just let the muse take over.
Yeah, that's beautifully described. I think any artist who would be listening right now would be nodding and nodding. When I mentioned the choice of a digital format for a platform for Peter in my book, it was that I said it lends itself to me going back at any point, at any time, as long as it's on the platform, and I can change an image that will link to the book, or I can change even some of the text if I realize that I didn't do proper service to Peter's work. I would look at an oil painting, and as you're getting started, you have a paint over option, don't you?
You do.
It's not one and done.
I can't tell you how many paintings, I go back to and say, this could use a little tweaking here and there. So
Yeah.
it is. But the other thing that I do love about it, as I said, I began the visual journey with gardening with Steve. And so we have beautiful gardens out. We built our house in 92, and we created a lot of beautiful gardens. And Steve ended up becoming the managing editor of Fine Gardening magazine. And he's a photographer. And so we had some stunning scenes in the garden. And I love the gardening part. And I love the designing. Back to the hedge, I get my piece of paper out and design, okay, this is going to be a circular garden and we're going to have blah, blah, blah. And Steve would come across me sitting in the house on the floor looking down at this nice, beautiful design. And he's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm designing a new garden. And he'd look at me. His brain works quite differently. And he'd say, Kate, the garden is 10 feet out that way. Why don't you go out and look at it? But I liked having this little
abstraction.
Yeah. And then we planted it according to my design. And it was just extraordinary for all of a season. And then the deer would come, or a storm would come, or some other obnoxious something would come. And then the garden is back to not square one, but it's, square 55. And you got to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? And it was about the probably about the third or fourth season that I said, okay, the painting is pulling me more, because I love having a finished piece. You put a frame on it, you put it on the wall, and no deer, no invasives are going to come. The only one who's likely to take it off the wall and change it is me, if I want to later. But I like that sense of finishing.
Well, while I'm being all noble about, the book forever, I also know I'm not going to live forever. So there's that. There is a important feeling of putting a stop to it and framing it. And so the framing part, it fits into the whole thing. For one thing, it says, once it's framed, I can put it in other people's hands and make some money and use 50% for the charities. Yeah. But what does it feel that moment when you say, okay, that's it, not another brushstroke frame or else?
What's that feel like? It's always a question. I work on a number of different paintings at once, and usually by the end of the month, I'm thinking about, okay, what is almost done? And those I want to see if I can do some final tweaks and then feel comfortable calling it done. And there's certainly ones where it's like, yep, that's it. I know it. And then there's others where it's like, I think that's it. And those may sit there for a month or a year or whatever because I'm just not sure. And sometimes it's sort of like, well, I quit. I'm calling it done because I can't figure out what I could do to make it better. And others, it's really strange how, a month or a year later, you might look at it and say, oh, bingo, this is what it needs.
Got it. It's nailed it.
Final stroke, and it's yours.
That's a beautiful. You're so introspective. It's scary, but I love it. And I think people are going to learn a lot with this conversation. But here's another aspect of you maybe holding the paintings until you feel it's ready. And that is, people are going to look at your work now with a critical eye. And not that you're putting out the shows for judging, you could, but it's like, okay, now I've got to put it out in the public. And now the first person to look at it may go, I don't know. How do you feel about it? You've got to take that kind of positive or negative feedback when you put the work out, but that's your baby they're looking at.
Right. Well, that's one of the beautiful things about being able to paint full time, because I have so many babies.
You get a portrait or a landscape orphanage in your studio.
Exactly. No, it used to be when it was just a part-time thing, and I was painting, maybe I would finish one painting a month or a quarter. And boy, when I finished that painting, I was so in love with it and devoted to it that what I couldn't figure out is, how does anybody sell their paintings? Because I can't let go of this.
Yeah.
Where now when I'm painting every day and I'm finishing, 8 or 10 paintings a month, it's you don't get personally as invested in them, and so it's easier to share them. And what's also I've learned is I'm more careful about not saying, I don't like this one, I'm painting over it, or giving it away or throwing it away or whatever. I realized that I had that experience just a couple of months ago where somebody wanted to come to the studio and they wanted to see some paintings that they had seen in a show. And they came to the studio. And so I was cleaning up and putting away some paintings that I didn't think were as good anymore. And so I put those in the other room. And this person walked in with a list of paintings that they wanted to look at. And one of them was a painting that I had just removed and put somewhere else. And he said, okay, yep, I'm going to take that one. And he took another one. And one of the ones that he took was this one that I didn't think I didn't like as much anymore. And it just goes to show you there's no accounting for taste. Is that the expression? I think everybody's got their own experience, and what resonates for somebody at that particular time may not resonate for somebody else. And that goes for the artist as well. So you gotta, you gotta be aware of that. And so when somebody doesn't like it, well, that's their problem.
Well, Kate, I'm looking at that painting behind you, and I see a little spot just under the sun there. It's like a holiday. It doesn't look like it's complete. It doesn't really speak to me. Couldn't you possibly fix that?
No. Or that'll be a little extra.
But you see, this is the cardinal rule of business that you lived and I taught about, which is everyone does have their own sense of what they value and how they value it. And there are some people who won't value something until you take care of that little teeny holiday up in the corner. And they're willing to pay extra. And the next person says, you know what I love about that? It's got some spots in there that looks like you didn't quite finish it by choice. You're telling us that the world is not perfect, and neither am I. Therefore, we all tell these stories about the product that we're going to receive, the service that you used to provide at Walker, the things we did at Reset when we have the venture showcases and we'd have judges, and lo and behold, someone's business idea and product, which, maybe I thought was, I marked it number 1, ends up number 12. And I'm going, what's going on? Now, what we coach those business owners was, that's some people are going to see you're not even close. The next person through the door might write you a check for $1 million because they think you've got a tremendous future with that.
Exactly.
So you really kind of hold yourself steady, and sort of moving toward the minutes we have left. You really kind of have to hold yourself steady like a keel in your own life.
Yes. And recognizing, I just was reading a essay from a guy who had just won some prestigious award, and he said the irony is I submitted the same painting to the same thing a couple of years ago, and I didn't even get accepted, never mind win an award. So it's, that kind of thing helps you realize it's all up. It's
not
love.
it's crapshoot maybe, but maybe that's the word you were looking for. But but it's a good one, and because here's what makes it different. If you were desperate to make the money that particular painting behind you was going to make, because it's going to put bread on your table, like many of the great artists of the past, you would be happy to take any kind of money for a loaf of bread. But you have another whole aspiration for your paintings, which is that the purchase of your paintings provides 50% of what you can do for others in their lives. And so, $50 or $500, 50% of that's going to be an expression of your values.
Yes.
Your business values as well as your personal values. It's a wonderful blend, Kate. It really is. I'd like to go on for an hour, but one thing I can tell you once we're off camera is because Kate's asked about what about podcasting? What's it like? Is that you really got to be careful not to go much beyond 30 minutes, because there's hardly anyone, even people who love me won't listen for much more than 30 minutes. And in the world these days, in the writing side of things, if you can't, put it down to 170 characters or whatever the tweet level is, people haven't got the attention for it. So you've got to be real careful to put something of real substance, but leave them with a little bit of curiosity about what else they could learn. And I can tell you folks that we have so much to learn in every way from Kate Emery, from her painting, from her charity, from her business acumen, for all of the ways that she is being a leader, not just called a leader, well past the years when the title made it easy for people to know. So Kate, congratulations on your art, and I'm looking for the next show. I'm finally going to find some money and buy, maybe not that one behind you, Kate. That's. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And if anybody is interested and they want to see some of my work online, kateemery.com is where you'll find it. And happy to have people out to the studio as well.
Yeah, right here in Connecticut, but anyone in the world can buy from Kate, because you can buy through the internet. So thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, Apple Podcasts, or go to actionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to actionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon.